Most guitar players think their problem is tone. Maybe they need a different overdrive. Maybe they need a better amp. Maybe they need a better EQ setting. But sometimes the biggest thing affecting how your guitar fits in the mix has nothing to do with your gear at all. It might actually be where you're playing on the neck. Because playing the same chord progression below the 7th fret or above the 7th fret can completely change how your guitar feels in a band. Not because the notes are different, and not because the tone has changed, but because the register has changed. And if you play with a band, a worship team, keys, other guitars, or even a backing track, understanding register might help your guitar sit within the mix better than any pedal ever would. One thing I've learned over the years is the fretboard, it's not just a place to find notes. It's a mix space. Where you play determines how much room your guitar occupies. It affects how much density you add. It affects how much you compete with other instruments that are also in the mix. And it even can affect the emotional role that your guitar has in the song. Most of us naturally gravitate to the lower positions on the neck. It's the open chords, it's the comfortable shapes, it's the big rhythm sounds. And those can sound fantastic. But when you add bass and drums and keys, other guitarists and vocals, that space that you're playing in becomes crowded very quickly. So why does that happen? The lower register guitar naturally feels bigger. It feels fuller, it feels more powerful. And that's part of what makes it so appealing. The challenge is in that lower register, you're also occupying territory that other instruments are already using. The bass is living down there. The left hand of the keyboard player is often living down there. You might also be competing with male vocalists. And, yes, maybe even a second guitarist. So while a lower register guitar can sound huge by itself, it can also add density very quickly to a full arrangement. And density isn't always the same thing as clarity. By itself, bigger often sounds better, but in a mix, every instrument is competing for attention. The goal isn't always to occupy more space. Sometimes the goal is to leave space. Now let's move the same musical idea higher on the neck. What is interesting is that we haven't changed the harmony. We're still supporting the same song, and we're even still playing the same progression, but the guitar suddenly occupies a very different place within the arrangement. One of the biggest mistakes that I see guitarists make is trying to solve all of their clarity problems with EQ. More treble, more presence, and even more volume. And sometimes those things help. We actually did a video a few weeks back talking about how to cut through the mix you may need the right EQ versus having more volume. But a lot of the time, the issue isn't in EQ at all. It's register. Moving a part higher up in the neck can naturally create some separation. You don't have to force your way through the mix. You can stop competing with as many instruments. And that's a very different way to think about guitar tone. Cutting through isn't always an EQ decision. Sometimes it's a register decision. And often the simplest solution is just moving the part somewhere else in the neck. This becomes even more important when there's two guitar players. Because one of the fastest ways to create congestion in the mix is putting two guitars in the exact same register. If both players are playing similar chord shapes and in the same register in the neck, everything starts to stack on top of each other. The guitars really aren't complementing each other anymore. They're actually competing. Notice that I didn't necessarily change the tone. I didn't need a completely different amp. I didn't need drastically different pedals. I mostly just changed where the parts were living. And the mix opened up. One guitar can provide support, and the other guitar can provide texture. One can stay grounded, and the other can create movement. And together, they can feel wider and clearer because they're not fighting for the exact same space. There is another lesson hidden inside of this. A simple high register part often works better than a complicated lower register part. We actually talked about a piece of this in our second video and talking about how playing simpler is often better. Not because higher is always better, but because it can leave some room. Some of the most effective guitar parts I've ever heard are often very simple. A few notes, a melodic idea, a delayed line, nothing flashy, nothing complicated, just intentional. So maybe the next time your guitar is feeling muddy or buried or it's just not fitting in the mix, before you start changing your pedals or your amps, your presets, or even your EQ settings, try changing your register. Move the part somewhere else on the neck, because sometimes the biggest improvement you can make isn't changing your tone, it's changing where your guitar lives. Thanks for watching, and if you're enjoying these conversations about how your guitar better fits within the mix of a full band context, consider subscribing. I want to hear about it in the comments too. Have you ever changed your register enough to really feel that mix open up? Let's hear about it. Thank you guys again. We'll catch you on the next one.